Welcome to the Off the Charts Football Podcast. I'm Matt Manocherian, former NFL scout and now director of football and research at Sports Info Solutions, joined by Aaron Schatz, the godfather of football analytics and the founder of Football Outsiders. As always, we've got the versatile Justin Stein on the controls, and this week we're joined by very special guest, Nate Weller, research associate at Sports Info Solutions. What's going on, Nate?
Not much. Thanks for having me on today.
All right. And before we get into the biggest games of the week, Aaron, I know you've got something you've been dying to talk about.
It's Pro Bowl season. And one of, I think, to a lot of analytics people, the most surprising Pro Bowl selections was the selection of Aaron Rodgers over either Dak Prescott or Kirk Cousins at quarterback for the NFC. So Rodgers is only 17th in ESPN's QBR. He's 12th in passing DVOA, 8th in DYAR, which is total value. And, I know that some analytics people, like Ben Baldwin, has basically made it his life's work to drag Aaron Rodgers on the internet. But then I look, and there was a tweet from SIS saying that in points earned, Aaron Rodgers is tied for first. And so I was really curious why this one metric has Aaron Rodgers so far ahead of all of the other advanced metrics, including something like QBR that tries to do some of the same things as far as separating a quarterback from his receiver.
So that's a great question. And I want to start off, I'll give a little bit of my high-level answer, and then Nate has some really good research here. I think that gets into the specifics of this. But when we talk, like you said, QBR is meant to do a similar thing, but I think total points really diverges from a lot of the more typical stats, in that when we look at anything from yards to touchdown percentage and rating to expected points added, these are all actually measures of passing game effectiveness. They're not necessarily measures of quarterback effectiveness per se. With total points, we're really seeking to make a measure that's more a reflection of quarterback value in specifics. And yeah, so far this year, we have Rodgers tied with Lamar Jackson. And I think that's an important distinction to make at first. Now, then we got to look in a little bit deeper and say, okay, well, at the end of the day, good quarterbacks are going to create a lot of value, and that's going to match up. So, Nate, what can you tell us about the specifics of why Aaron Rodgers this year?
So there's two reasons overall that really stand out for why we still like him so much in total points. And those being interceptions and interceptable passes. Obviously, Rodgers' total interceptions this year have been talked about a lot. He doesn't turn the ball over a lot, but then he also doesn't have a lot of dropped interceptions either. And if you compare that to someone like Dak, who, as you mentioned, is one of the guys going up against him for like the Pro Bowl vote or in a lot of other metrics, Dak has rated out really well. But going into the guts of it, Dak has lost almost 3 times as much value as Rodgers just from interceptions and dropped interceptions alone. So that's one area, just Rodgers' ability to essentially not, have these terrible interceptions or these, back-breaking interceptions has been huge. And then the other is dropped passes. So Rodgers has recouped the most value from dropped passes of any quarterback this season. And since total points is a division of credit metric, he's still, like, say he, throws a 12-yard pass on 3rd and 10 that's dropped, he's still going to get credit for that as a good play by him. And so no one's gotten more value back than he has this year from those plays.
Interesting. Does it have anything to do at all with offensive line and blocking? I know that Green Bay's offensive line grades out really well in ESPN's pass block win rate metric.
So in one way, yes. So he doesn't get a lot of points one way or another from his line. But by our metric, one of the reasons Jackson is not ahead of him is SIS likes the Ravens line a lot. So Jackson has actually conceded more points to his line than Rodgers has. And so that's one of the reasons, at least.
But I want to be clear about that, because I think there's something that's a little bit kind of potential to be confused there. That's not to say that we are taking pressure rate and making that something that is evaluating the quarterback at all. It's that in the division of credit, specifically, we're looking at blown blocks, and we're looking at basically there's a baseline for how a quarterback will perform when there's 0 blown blocks on a play, 1 blown block on a play, 2 blown blocks on a play. That depend on, different contextual information about the play. That amount, that's kind of the baseline, can be different. So yes, Lamar Jackson is living in an environment where he's dealing with very few blown blocks, not just pressure rate we're talking about, but blown blocks on pass plays. And as a result of that, we're seeing that he's not kind of recouping as much value as Rodgers is for that same stat. But that's not to say that Rodgers is an outlier, and we're measuring that Green Bay is giving up a lot of pressures and Rodgers is performing well under pressure, and therefore he's doing well in total points. That would be a misunderstanding of how this is working.
Interesting. All right. Thanks for answering that question, because it was very much on my mind when I saw that tweet.
Yeah, it's really funny. Alex, our good colleague, he wrote a piece a couple of weeks ago that was looking at the MVP race, and he kind of had a cool chart that looked at it longitudinally over the season. And I remember there being different points in the season where I thought Rodgers is the MVP. No, Russell Wilson's the MVP. At this point, I'm not making any sort of an argument against Lamar Jackson, but it is interesting when you look at the different sorts of statistical measures that it would put Rodgers up there, when a lot of people can look at kind of the box score stats and say, oh, the Packers offense, their passing offense isn't that great. He must not be very good. I think their offensive line's been just fine this year. Their receivers are really bad. We'll get into them a little bit later, but the amount of drop passes is
interesting to dig into QBR, because I know QBR tries to do that too. QBR tries to account for dropped passes, and it's clearly counting drops very differently, because Rodgers comes out really, 17th is worse than he comes out in DVOA. He comes out really bad in QBR. And you guys accounting for drop passes feel that boosts Rodgers. So, we'd have to dig into like what each system says about each play or each game to figure out the differences. But the difference is sort of interesting and big.
Yeah, and their division of credit definitely works very different. I think there's only divided out the quarterback. Ours is looking at all the different players in terms of their impact. So,
right.
And they built that system, 10 years ago without much tinkering. So
they've done a little bit of tinkering on it. I don't know how much tinkering they've done on the trying to split value between quarterback and receivers parts.
I think it tends to match EPA pretty well.
It does match EPA very well.
And we're talking about just passing total points, correct?
Jackson and Rodgers are actually tied in total.
This
and
is total
obviously
points.
Jackson gets a lot more of his total points from the rushing side of things.
Right. Rodgers is a good runner, but he only has 26 runs this year. Primarily, of course, that's scrambles.
Right. And that's probably worth pointing out, too, that one of the other reasons that Jackson hasn't pulled away from Rodgers is he has about 100 less attempts than Rodgers, and that does matter in a stat like total points, where he just has less chance on pass plays to accrue value. And he's obviously been awesome as a runner, but just comparing the effectiveness of run plays to pass plays, it takes a lot longer to accrue a lot of total points running the ball than it does passing. So
even when you run as efficiently as Lamar Jackson does, you still
Correct.
Right. There's still passing is still generally more efficient.
Yeah.
All right, let's get to our games of the week, which I think we decided we're going to take this week in chronological order.
Woo!
So that means we're going to start with Saturday, because Nate here is a Buffalo guy. So we're starting with Buffalo at New England. This is one of our big games for Super Bowl odds this week. New England goes to the Super Bowl 23% of the time if they win, 15.7% if they lose. Buffalo 4.2% with a win, 3.5% with a loss. But it's a pretty big game because, for the Patriots, if they actually lose the division for the first time since 2008, it will be a shock.
Yeah, I'm curious to hear, Nate, what you make of this matchup. Nate being kind of the studying Buffalo on a daily basis, as I know you do, up against Aaron's prowess with the Patriots. What do you see out of this matchup?
I mean, I think it's not to any surprise of anyone, but it's going to be a defensive battle. I think the last game when they played earlier in the season, pretty much what turned it was a blocked punt for a touchdown by New England, but really neither offense got it going at all in that game. And I would expect it to be similar this week, in that neither of these offenses have really been lighting it up this season, but both the defenses have pretty much been lights out. So I think it's going to kind of boil down to which offense can do more. I also wanted to bring up that I think we get to watch the two best corners in football right now play against each other this week, in Trey White and Stephon Gilmore. Looking at any advanced metrics on those two, they've pretty much been in a league of their own the entire year, and across the board they're almost identical. I pulled it up, and both of them have been targeted 77 times. White's allowing 5.4 yards per target, Gilmore's allowing 5.3, and then their quarterback rating when targeted is 25.7 for Gilmore, or for White, and 21.5 for Gilmore, and then they both have 6 interceptions. So they've both just been as shut down as it comes this year for defensive backs, and I think it'll be a lot of fun to get to watch them face off again this week.
Yeah, the partners have been really good too. I don't have the numbers right in front of me right now, but I know both J.C. Jackson and Taron Johnson
Yeah, Taron
have
Johnson. Yeah,
really good stats also, and those are the number 2 cornerbacks for each team.
Yep, you can't have just one good corner. You got to have two. But I think we're all in agreement. Stephon Gilmore and Tre'Davious Wright. I take those two guys above any other corners in the NFL this season. And I'm with you. I don't think it's anywhere close. Both these guys are like vacuums with interceptions. It seems like, even though you try to avoid them as much as you can. Aaron, did Gilmore have another game with more interceptions than completions allowed?
He did, and it came pretty close, because usually what happens is the guy he's covering will get 1 or 2 completions, but he'll get it against a zone when he doesn't really have Gilmore on him. So I don't know. How much Tyler Boyd did you see? I saw them go to Boyd 3 times, and twice was intercepted. So
yeah, I saw Tyler Boyd standing next to Gilmore when he had the ball in his hands. It's pretty much what I saw.
I will say with this game, these two teams are going in very opposite directions over the last few weeks. So, I tend to believe in longer term stats because it's a larger sample size over the shorter term. But the shorter term is pretty noteworthy. Passing the ball on offense, New England was 14th in weeks 1 to 9, 23rd in weeks 10 to 15. Buffalo, 30th in weeks 1 to 9, 8th in weeks 10 to 15.
Yeah, and Nate, you wrote a couple weeks ago about how they've been using a lot more of the kind of no-huddle, hurry-up stuff, 11 personnel, get in and out. You think that's had a lot to do with those improvements?
Yeah, definitely, especially over leading up into the Ravens game. They were using no huddle and 11 personnel on pretty much all of their offensive snaps, which was, up through week 9, I think it was. They almost never went to no huddle. And then over those 4 weeks, no one in the league used it more than they did. And it was really just a full 180. And then with that came just keeping the same personnel grouping on the field and just a lot of consistency. And I think it helped letting Allen get up to the line, see the defense. And there's rumors that Dable was kind of in his ear up in the press box, kind of vague off from last year. Never confirmed, but a lot of people are thinking that. And then that really helped their offense take off. They found a rhythm. They found a lot more consistency. And they got away from that a bit against Pittsburgh. I'm not sure if that was more game plan specific, but they kind of got away from the no huddle, went back to 21 personnel a bit. So I'm kind of curious to see if they get back into pushing the tempo and really trying to bring it to New England this week.
Yeah, the offense, which had been on an upswing, has definitely been on a downswing the last couple of weeks, obviously against really good defenses. But even after adjusting for defense, that's a little bit of a downswing, even in adjusted numbers. So here's another really good defense for them to play. So perhaps the downswing sort of continues, but it's not like the Patriots offense is lighting it up. The other thing is the Patriots come into this game with a lot of injuries. Brady's got some kind of an elbow issue. Edelman looks hobbled out there. Jonathan Jones, the slot corner, missed practice this week with a groin injury and may not play. So Buffalo, I think, is in a little bit more better shape health-wise.
Yeah, I think if Buffalo wins this game, I think it's probably on the ground. I just was rewatching that Buffalo-Pittsburgh game last night, and I noticed that they ran power to the right side about 600 times in that game. It felt like even when it wasn't working, they kept coming back to it, probably to the chagrin of the guy sitting right next to me right now at times. But I think if they win, it's going to be that. The thing that they're going to have to not do, because, by the way, the New England run defense, meanwhile, against Cincinnati looked terrible. They allowed Cincinnati to move the ball on them early in the game, and then again in the second half, they were moving the ball on the ground throughout the day. So that's not a good matchup if that continues there, because I don't think Buffalo is going to try to throw the ball to beat the Patriots. So that has to be the way that it goes. But what they can't do is put the ball on the ground. Buffalo put the ball on the ground over and over again against Pittsburgh. I know Pittsburgh's very, opportunistic in that sense, but Brady's not going to throw them the ball like Duck did. So I think turnovers is really what I look at in this game, because I think Buffalo's going to have to run the ball, and I think they're going to have to physically dominate and get to Brady if they're going to win this game.
I will note that the Patriots' run defense, despite having a bad game against Cincinnati, is still 7th on the season. So it's actually not weak. It's
not bad.
Comparatively weak compared to the pass defense, and it had a bad week last week. So
I know N'Keal Harry didn't have a big stat game last week, just a couple of catches, but I kind of like what I'm seeing out of him out there. What are you hearing from the kind of Boston media, Aaron, where you live?
They really wanted to get involved last week. Obviously, they gave him a ton of snaps. There were only a handful of snaps for Philip Dorsett, Jacoby Myers. Clearly, they want to get him on the same page as Brady. They want to get them game experience together. I would bet that N'Keal Harry is a big part of this offense in 2020. I just don't know who the quarterback of this offense will be in 2020.
I think that it seems like they're really trying to accelerate him up to speed because they realize they don't have much else unless he can be a difference maker for them. But I kind of keep an eye on him. If I was doing any of that daily fantasy stuff, I'd keep an eye out on N'Keal Harry having one of those breakout games.
And I should point out that while I said that it would be such a shocker if Buffalo beats the Patriots and goes on to win the division, I should point out the Patriots would have to lose to Miami for the Bills to win the division. If they end up tied, the Patriots have a common opponent's tiebreaker over the Bills, even if the Bills beat the Patriots on Saturday. But wow, it would sure herald a changing of the guard if the Bills beat the Patriots, no matter which one of them actually won the division.
Nate, you expecting it?
I'm expecting a close game, and that's as much as I'm willing to.
You'll take the under
here. Yeah.
Yeah, I think the injuries make it look a little worse for the Patriots, but I still think that their defense will confuse Allen, and I think that they're more likely to pick up turnovers than the Patriots are, like you said, Matt. So, I mean, I still would favor the Patriots in this game, but it's closer than I would like it to be. And the Bills are absolutely a team on the rise. They're very well coached.
Yeah, tough team. All right, let's move it ahead chronologically. What do you have for us, Aaron?
Well, let's go with the biggest game of Sunday. This is the biggest game of the week for the playoffs. No duh. It's Dallas at Philadelphia because Dallas is in with a win, 34% if they lose. Philadelphia is out with a loss, 66% if they win. So basically, Dallas wins, they're in, Philly's out. And if Philly wins, then Dallas has to hope for a Philly loss in Week 17. So this is a hugely important game.
Yeah, pretty interesting. I think most people would agree. Dallas looks like kind of the stronger team personnel-wise. I know Philadelphia's secondary has been exposed a few times lately, but yet here Philadelphia is at home with a chance to kind of to take control of this division again.
And this is another one where injury might play a role because Dak Prescott now has a shoulder injury, and he is not practicing. Did not practice yesterday, and may not practice this week leading up to the game.
So we expect kind of a no practice week, but I'd be surprised if he missed the game.
No, he's going to play.
Yeah, he'll be there.
The question is at what percent is he going to play?
Right. Nate, what are you looking forward to in this matchup?
So the thing I was looking at is obviously speaking of injuries on the Philadelphia side, they're pretty much running out of skill position players on offense. And so I was kind of looking at what they're going to be forced into this weekend. And even before running out of the requisite number of receivers to run other things, they were the league leaders in using 12 personnel. So I would expect them to look Ertz's way and Goddard's way quite a bit this weekend. And then along those lines, the Cowboys actually rank as 21st by total points when tight ends are targeted, and their positive percentage allowed is the worst in the league when teams are targeting tight ends. So that's where I'm kind of looking for Philadelphia is, they don't have a lot of receivers. They don't have a lot of healthy skill position players, but they still have Ertz and they still have Goddard, and that's actually a weakness of the Cowboys.
I wrote the same thing down. Dallas is 29th in DVOA against tight ends, and in the first meeting of these teams, Goddard has 69 yards and the only Philadelphia touchdown. Similar teams on defense. Both of these teams are a little bit below average on defense. Both of them are dealing with injuries. Obviously, Philly's gotten some of their defensive backs back, and now Dallas is working on linebacker injuries. But the big difference with these teams is on offense, where Dallas is second and Philadelphia is 15th. So, I mean, that's the big gap. The other thing is the Eagles are 26th against the run since Week 10. So in the last few weeks, they've had trouble stopping the run. Obviously, Dallas likes to run the ball.
So I think there are a couple great matchups kind of with like you mentioned, that Dallas up front against the Eagles up front defensively. One thing that I think is kind of a mismatch in this game, and this is an area of expertise for both of you guys to an extent, is the game management. We look at the Eagles year in and year out as one of the teams that's more aggressive on fourth and short, that will take those chances. And Dallas this year has done more than anybody to sacrifice Pythagorean wins for what actually shows up in their win-loss record. So kind of an interesting matchup there. I think a lot of looking into this game, when you look at it, you love the matchups on the field for Dallas, at least I do. But being in Philadelphia and with that big game management, difference. I mean, the coin toss thing, for all the ridiculousness that the NFL, that was their fault for Walt Coleman or whoever, totally ridiculous trying to make the game about him. But at the same time, Dak, you got to know starting in middle school that you say defer.
The word is defer.
Like you say defer. If you can't think of the word, you don't say any word. You say, well, I forget my options. You know, you don't say kickoff. So as much as that was ridiculous, it's got to come back to their lame duck head coach at some point. I don't have a lot of, I feel really dumb picking a lame duck head coach on the road that I have no faith in. But I think his team is better.
Yeah, I will say this is kind of a surprise, but the Edge Sports coach rankings, the critical call index of fourth down calls, Dallas is actually 9th in the league. So since some mistakes early in the season, Garrett has gotten better. Philadelphia is 2nd in the league behind Baltimore, but Dallas is only 9th.
I think some of that comes too that after Jerry Jones kind of publicly went after Garrett about such things, he's started to turn it around. I know in the Thanksgiving game against the Bills, he went for it 4th and 1 from like his own 22-yard line, something like that. And I remember being absolutely shocked to see Jason Garrett doing that. So
when the owner's behind you being aggressive, it's a lot easier to be aggressive.
Yeah.
That's the main reason why I'm sorry to digress, but I can't see Urban Meyer going there because I can't see him being like attached to the puppet master like that. That would be an interesting thing to keep an eye on, though.
No, that's something that we all question a lot of, the idea of whether even same with Lincoln Riley, right? Lincoln Riley would be a popular candidate for that job. But, same question. Do you want to have to sublimate yourself to Jerry Jones?
All right. Anything else you guys wanted to talk about with this game?
I'll give you one more weird split. Philadelphia's defense is 26th on first down and 27th on third down, but 2nd on second down. That sounds like one of those splits to me that's probably random, but if it does mean something, it would be really interesting to figure out what that is.
This episode of Splits Happen is brought to you by the Football Outsiders Almanac.
Hey, this is Aaron Schatz from Football Outsiders, and I want to tell you about Football Outsiders Almanac 2019, celebrated as the best annual guide to the football season, featuring the most accurate NFL team projections, more than 500 fantasy football player projections with our Kubiak Fantasy Football preseason projection system, and expanded college football projections for the top 50 FBS teams and all 130 teams in FBS. This is our book that you know and love from every year, the most authoritative and innovative guide to professional football around, cutting-edge statistical analysis, obsessive film study, trademark humor, tons of stats from our friends at Sports Info Solutions. You can get Football Outsiders Almanac 2019 on our site, footballoutsiders.com. You can read a sample chapter about the Denver Broncos. You can buy the book in PDF form for $20, or you can go to Amazon.com and get a paperback with over 500 pages of previews for $28.95. Football Outsiders Almanac 2019, the best annual guide to the NFL and college football seasons.
All right, let's keep it going. What else do you have coming up in the chronology here?
I have our third most important game of the week is Monday night, although the reasons why this is important are weird. Green Bay at Minnesota. Green Bay goes to the Super Bowl 13% of simulations when they win, only 4.3% when they lose. Minnesota 7.9% with a win, 5.6% with a loss. Yet a Minnesota win does not give them the division. I think they need Green Bay to also lose in Week 17 in order to win the division. But this game, I don't remember exactly how, but it really affects the San Francisco-Seattle battle, because if those two teams end up tied, this game comes into play for strength of victory figures and strength of schedule figures for each team.
Yeah, so you get one of those bizarre scenarios, huh?
Yeah, there's like a bizarre scenario where I don't remember, unfortunately, what it is, but Seattle is rooting for one team and San Francisco is rooting for the other team.
Yeah, I think it's huge looking at just all of that home field advantage stuff and how it works out. Look at the Packers team. They're 7-1 at home this year. And I think if they can get home field with Devontae Adams healthy, I think they're really scary. But I think you could say the same thing about the Seahawks, the Niners, the Saints, the Packers, all 11-3 teams. And then, throw the Vikings in there with them. I think just a loss behind all of those teams. The buys and the home field, I think, are just colossal for this NFC Championship. Where you remember a long time ago, we were talking before the season, Aaron, about how the NFC looked stronger than the AFC. I think was kind of the narrative, and then for a while we were like, oh, maybe not, and now here we are again at the end, and at least more stratified.
Yes, there's more teams that are in it in the NFC. I will say, by our ratings, Green Bay is a cut below those other teams. They won't be if they have home field advantage, because the home field will cancel that out. But they only have Pythagorean. They have something like 8.3 wins compared to 11. They have really been lucky in close games.
Interesting stuff. Nate, what are you looking forward to in this matchup?
So the thing I noticed the most is that the Packers really like to run dime, or just in this case, I just looked at anywhere where they had 6 or more defensive backs on the field, and they're doing that about 48% of the time, which I believe is the second most in the league. And then you've got the Vikings on the other side, who live in 21 and 12 personnel, more than pretty much any team in the league, and those things just don't really go. So it's going to be interesting if the Vikings can force the Packers into their base defense, see if they can kind of take advantage of that. I know the splits on the Green Bay defense when they were facing 12 or 21 this season, it was about 0.1 EPA per play when they were facing it, and then on against all other personnel, that was about 0. So there's a pretty big difference against these personnel groupings that the Vikings really rely on. So I'm curious to see what the Packers do to try and combat that, because it, on paper at least, doesn't look like a great matchup for the Packers defense, even though for the most part they've been pretty solid.
I wanted to make sure I got that right. The Packers like to play more dime, but you're saying when they've played against 12 personnel, they've struggled compared to against other teams.
Yeah, 12 and 21 both. Both of those done very
big
well.
Packages.
Yeah,
interesting.
And the numbers that I found kind of match that. For example, Green Bay is only 25th against the run in DVOA. They're 31st in adjusted line yards. So obviously teams run more often from 21 and 12 personnel. And Green Bay is allowing 8.7 yards per play against play action, and Minnesota is 3rd in the league in play action use. Obviously you can play action from any personnel, but the trick of we're running the ball works better when you've got 21 or 12 out there. So I think that those stats kind of match what you're saying about Green Bay's defense.
Yeah, and then on the Minnesota side of that, I think what they have to say with their 12 personnel, we'll see how the injury to Dalvin Cook it plays out, especially as we get towards the postseason. It sounds like he's going to miss a few weeks, but the 2 tight ends they have now between Rudolph and Irv Smith, who's really come along this year, and then Thielen and Diggs, of course, on the outside. They've got a really good group of players there, where it almost it reminds you of the Rams last year with their 11 personnel, where they didn't need to sub because that personnel group was so good and so efficient. You watch them, they start the game under center. They play all this play action, under center stuff, just putting stress on the defense in really simple ways that are simple but stressful, and they control the football game. Really interesting stat that you guys bring up there about the Packers on the other side, and how this could be the exact opposite of the matchup that they want to be in.
When the Packers are on offense, it should be a really big Devontae Adams game. Devontae Adams is obviously the best of the Packers receivers. Geronimo Allison is really bad in our numbers this year. And Minnesota is 23rd covering number 1 options, but 5th covering number 2s. Although, I mean, at this point, they've basically retired Xavier Rhodes. They barely played him last week. So at the beginning of the year, he might have been their option to cover number 1s, given on what he had done in past years. He has fallen so far this year.
Yeah, I look at the Vikings defense, and they're so good with Hunter and Griffin on the edge. They've got these athletic linebackers. Harrison Smith is one of the top players in SIS WAR for every year that we've gone back since the stat exists. And he's complemented by Anthony Harris. I still don't know how Anthony Harris went undrafted out of Virginia because he was a ball hawk since day one. I guess he probably ran slow. But I'm with you. When the Packers have the ball, I think it's got to be play action, run the ball, help neutralize those Vikings edge rushers, and then they try to get the ball to Adams. I think Minnesota's either going to devote double coverage to Adams, in which case it becomes a run game for the Packers, or I think if they decide to leave him alone out there, then I think it's going to be Adams all day long, because he's really the only target that Rodgers has that he can have any faith in. We talked about all the drops before. Play 1 of the last game, you saw the play action and the deep ball to MVS that I said Matt LaFleur basically placed the ball in his hands, and he still dropped it for what should have been a 75-yard touchdown. this is the receiver that's going to be the guy, and this is the matchup where the number one receivers are going to have a chance.
And the Minnesota pass rush is really good, like you said. The Packers' offensive line is really good, but Rodgers runs into his own pressure. So watch, these plays are going to get into 3, 4, 5 seconds. You cannot hold Daniel Hunter back that long, like he will get to Rodgers if Rodgers holds the ball that long.
Yeah, and here's my surprise of the day. I'm going to criticize Rodgers because rewatching that game, he took a horrible sack. He had 3rd and 3 on the plus 28, up 8 with 4.5 minutes left. They're in field goal range to put the game away. And by the way, the Packers offense really couldn't put the game away against the Bears defense at all in that entire game. He took that unacceptable sack, got knocked out of field goal range. They ended up punting. They ended up getting lucky that they ended up winning the game because of what happened on the last play of the game with number 49 just not wanting to pitch the ball. But really, really uncharacteristic play there by Rodgers. And for somebody that is as much of a Rodgers apologist as anybody, and I'll go to bat for the total point stat for the way that it feels about him. That was a bad one.
Yeah, he's taken a lot of sacks like that this year.
Yeah, I was going to say, actually, as I was digging through the guts of total points earlier, looking for information about why we like Rodgers, one of the areas that he actually does not grade out super well in this season is in his taking sacks. So he has taken a lot of high-value sacks this year. So obviously he makes up for it in a lot of other ways, but that is one of the areas that he hasn't excelled at this year.
Are there other areas where he loses a bunch of points? Does he lose points, say, for throwing away passes at a high rate?
Yeah, so the other area that he does pretty poorly in when you kind of get into the nitty-gritty of the metric is off-target throws and those throwaways. So he's actually towards the bottom of the league in terms of how much value he's losing from off-target throws and just not completing the ball on those.
Including throwaways when you say that.
Right. Yeah, so his throwaways and just off-target passes in general, that's actually an area where he's not done well. And so I know a lot of the criticism or pushback on Rodgers has kind of looked at those throws under a microscope, and it might be nice for him to hear that he is getting deducted for those plays. He's just doing a lot of other things well, and that's why the metric as a whole still likes him.
Interesting stuff. Anything else that you guys are looking forward to in this final big game?
It's too bad it's not for the division title because that would be awesome.
Yeah.
I don't know why our playoff odds have Green Bay dropping so much with a loss, despite the fact that Minnesota doesn't win the division with this win, but it does. So I don't know. It's an important game.
And score one for intuition in the Detroit projections for this season.
The projection was doing well there for a few weeks, and then the Lions completely fell apart.
All right. On that note, we will sign off. Thank you again to all of our listeners. Please help us spread the word about the Off the Charts Football Podcast by subscribing, rating, and most importantly, writing reviews. You can hit us up on Twitter. I'm at Matt Mano. He's at FO_A Schatz. And our guest, Nate Weller, is at NateWellerr. Nate Weller with an extra R at the end. And Sports Info Solutions also on Instagram at Sports Info Solutions. For my co-host, Aaron Schatz, our guest, Nate Weller, and our producer, Justin Stein, I'm Matt Manocherian, and thank you for joining us for the latest episode of the Off the Charts Football Podcast.